Good afternoon, everybody. It's July the 15th, and it's our weekly In Conversation. And today my guest is Loraine Rutt, the brilliant porcelain globe maker. And she's welcoming us in her studio in the south of London. Loraine has, in fact, two studios. She has one at the bottom of her garden, where she's welcoming us now. And then she has another one, which is in Peckham under the railway arches, where I saw her back in February. And it was cold and damp there, but it was very charming. So Loraine, thank you so much for opening your doors to us.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming.
And I want to start with how you got into cartography.
Actually, I'm realising I'm going to have to stand up and go and get something again in a second.
Do that.
I'm going to do that. So, excuse me, everyone. I only found this today. I've mentioned this a few times in relevance to people. So this is what got me into cartography. This here is probably back to front on your screen, so I apologise to any Welsh people. So this is an ordnance survey map that has been several sheets cut out, stuck together. And do you remember that stuff? I don't know what it was called in Canada or the States, but I think it was called transperceal here, and people used it for covering books and all sorts of things. It was a bit of a fad in the 60s. My grandfather, who was in the Royal Fusiliers and then in Remy, he went right through from 1939, 1945, through France, D-Day, everything, fixing wirelesses in tanks and so on. But before the Second World War, with the Royal Fusiliers, he was actually stationed at Pembrokeshire Castle. And what that meant, I didn't know this at the time, but my very, very earliest I remember I spent the holidays with this map, and it's of a beautiful place called Pembrokeshire in South Wales, and every holiday would start with this. Would come out, it'd go on the breakfast table, and we'd look and plan a walk. And so I just associated maps with really nice sandwiches, quite often with bits of sand and grit in them, wherever. The sandwiches, maybe a boiled egg, nice bottle of fizzy pop or whatever. And I just got drawn in by the potential for adventure, the idea that you could look at this piece of paper. It's a bit like learning to read a book. I learned to read symbols, and they just kind of excited me about the possibilities. And I still now will sit and look at a map rather than a book. And I do look at SatNav and various. There's quite a lot of amazing apps out there now. But you can't beat. There's another one here. You can't beat a good ordnance survey map. This is particularly, I pulled this out today, it's particularly poignant because it's got Barnard Castle on there. Any of you in England will know that that's particularly significant at the moment. But there's something to do with the mark making, the amount of tiny bits of detail that you can get on a map, the layers and layers and layers of things. It will tell you history as well through place names and everything. So I was just fascinated, and I left school quite young. My mum sadly passed away just after my 15th birthday, and tragically a week before her 34th. And so we were just completely uprooted. I didn't still and do my levels in education. So we moved back to London to be with my grandparents. And I got an apprentice cartographer at Birkbeck College. So that's kind of how it all started, with drawing off maps. And I was just really, really lucky to be there at that particular time when that advert was given there. And I just remember opening the Evening Standard paper and saying to my dad, cartographer, and he went, "Oh, that's Max, you'll like that." And I applied for the job and I got it. It was that, kind of meant to be, I suppose. So that's how I got into cartography. And the maps that I drew at Birkbeck were for all the different academics that worked at the university, so mainly geography and geology department, but sometimes history. But because Birkbeck's an evening class, so you can do your degree in the evenings. It was set up as a working men's education college. And so the maps that I drew were kind of things from, so somebody would be doing research, like botanical research around the Arctic Circle, somebody else would be doing geomorphology in the African Rift Valley, somebody else would be doing social history of, areas of London. So it was always very, very different. And I think that, I was kind of slightly rebellious because I'd my life turned upside down. If I could go back and have access to that map library, the stuff that I worked on then was, it just, went in. It was really interesting, but I was slightly frustrated, and I knew that I was a maker. I quite like drawing, but I really wanted to make things. So that's how the cartography happened. And I did my qualifications with them and stayed there for nearly 9 years.
Fantastic. So I apologize, I'm back. I lost you. I lost you. Someone is not muted. Can you all mute yourself? I apologize. I lost you for a second, but I'm back on my phone and on data, so that's all good.
I've got you back now. Yes.
Yeah. No, that's it. Sorry. Someone is not muted and chopping something. I don't know what it is. And I'm on my phone, so I can't see everybody. I apologize for this. It's terrible. When you joined Central St. Martin's, it must have been a momentous event in your life.
Oh my goodness! I still remember it so as if it was yesterday. I'd enjoyed working at Birkbeck, but there was just a couple of most of the other technicians there were guys, which is fine. But I was a lot younger than everybody else. And then I get accepted. I did evening classes to kind of get my portfolio together. And I remember the first day at Central just going, I get to do this every day for 3 years. Oh my God, I was in heaven. I absolutely loved it. And the friends we made on that day are still, at least half of that group of people are, my best buddies, closest friends.
Yeah. And that's where you discovered clay and ceramics, is that right?
Not exactly. No, the reason I applied to do ceramics at Central, I didn't do a foundation. I was a bit of I got lucky that I got in there without having done a foundation, because I was so adamant I wanted to do ceramics. I was very lucky going back to childhood. Both my junior school and my high school, Maidstone Grammar School, Girls' Grammar School, they both had teachers there who must have had an absolute passion for ceramics, because the first time I made something from clay I was probably 7. And I just loved the way that it felt. And then in my high school, they actually had a dedicated pottery department. So I did one of my GCSEs was in ceramics. So this is some of the stuff I was saying to you earlier that I was finding behind my nan's curtains when we're tidying her house last year. And so I've just been reunited with things that I thought were wrong. That should have been actually.
So let's move to the globes, because it's so absolutely fascinating what you do. Can we start with first having a look at one of the globes, and then I'd like you to take us through the process from beginning to end, because there are so many steps and it's such fiddly, patient, detailed work. But first, let's take a globe and see, the size of it.
Okay, so I wanted them to be sort of palm-sized. I really wanted them to feel. Can you see that? Is that coming through clearly? I can see it on my screen.
Yeah.
I think it's back to front. I've got to work out how to do this on Zoom to flip it so it's the right way.
That's okay.
So yeah, they were sort of inspired by the 18th century pocket globes, although I saw one last week on Instagram that was a silver globe. this size that was made in 1600 and something, I can't remember, and it's silver, and then the actual globe is then pierced with the constellations, so you can take the thing apart and hold it up and see the stars. I'm like, all right, I'm doing that. That's my next thing. I'm going to try and nail that one. And so the first ones I started, I modelled by hand. Excuse me a second, I'm just going to grab one. So this is one of the earliest ones, and I did all the initial model making for this with a really rough sphere and kind of just approximate. And then when I realised, so I showed them at open studios for a while, and then people really liked them and bought them, and I just thought there was something about, up until that point they'd been very much inspired by the ceramics and making the ceramics quite loosely, and then I don't know, I just had a bit of a light bulb moment and thought, hang on a minute, I am a cartographer, I've got those skills, let's just flip it, and yeah, they're going to be ceramic, but let's just try and get them with a cartographer's exactitude. And then I started looking around for resources to try and get the data so I could get everything as pinpointed, as accurate as I can. So there's a bit of difference between these two. So if I hold them up side by side.
Oh, great. Yes.
You can see, you know, the general shapes I had right, but this is based on actual satellite survey data. So, although it's amplified about 70 times because it would be smoother than a billiard ball if it was completely to scale. So the heights are exaggerated. And they're made in porcelain. I had to make, there was a lot of stages. So initially I got a 3D print done, but the resolution of that, the quality of that was quite rough and very pixelated, and loads and loads of lines on it. And so what I did was I took a cast of that and made a plaster model, and then I refined the plaster model and sculpted it. The 3D print had no longitude, latitude. There were no coastlines kind of carved into it. None of these Pacific Islands or any of those locations. None of that on it. And so it's a bit of a mix of 21st century technology and then applying centuries-old ceramic techniques of duplicating, mold making, and using slightly different materials so I can get the longevity out of it. So in traditional ceramics, your plaster molds have there's a master mold which is called a case mold, which is your mold, your mother superior of the molds. But because this detail is so fine, when you pass plaster to plaster, you have to use a blocking agent, soft soap and whatever, to stop it sticking to each other, and that would just completely obliterate all the surface detail on that. So I had to find another material, and the material I use is a platinum rubber, and the clue to how expensive that is in the name. So it was just, it then started going along these things, and crikey, it just, the more time I put into it, the more expensive the materials becoming. It's been more and more an investment. And I had a wobbly moment about halfway through 2015 where I just thought, you know, is this going to really be worth it? You know, how do I explain to my husband that I've just blown the money we've got to do up the house and trying to develop this idea? Thankfully, everything just started to, you know, I got some great photographs done by a really good mate called Gareth, who was very kind and supported me, and I knew how I wanted to style things.
Can we just step back a little bit? So you put the you put the material in the mold and you fire it?
Not in the mold, no. When they come out of the mold, they're very. In fact, I've got one here. When they come out of the mold, they are they have a lot of seams on them. I don't know if Sharon's there, because Sharon came and did a workshop with me last year, so she'll remember exactly how they look. But they're quite, they're blank. And so what I have to do is to draw all of the coastlines and the islands and things in. But before I do that, you have to take off the seams from the moulds. And it's a 7-piece mould, so there are seams all over the place. So you have to kind of go back in and carve mountains back, and it's very easy to take too much off. Then once I've done that, I mark up the longitude and the latitude, scribe that in, and then once the longitude and latitude are drawn on, then I draw the coastlines and the islands in. Then I leave them to dry. Then once they're actually dry, I start to paint them. So this is a part painted one.
Can you put it more to your right? Yes, here we go. That's it, perfect.
This one's part painted, very roughly and quickly part painted. But this is one that I painted as an example. So if I don't put the coastlines in, if I don't actually scribe those in, there's nowhere for that paint to sit. There's no lines for it to sit into. So it just bleeds everywhere. So I've got a very precise pin needle that I use. If you use something too thick, you get too big a groove, then you lose a lot of the definition. So it's it's been one of those things that just developed. Kind of, I make my own tools, so I've got something that I can use to scribe. I'm just going to show you those. Here. This is my little scribing kit. So anybody who's following me on Instagram will see these popping up from time and again, sort of on the screen. But this thing here is basically one of my grandmother's sewing needles.
Right.
Really good quality bit of Sheffield steel from 1950s. In a tube, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but you can get kind of epoxy putty that's in 2 parts. You mix it together and you have about 10 minutes to form it, and then it sets solid. And it was a really horrible yellow colour, so I covered it in leather. And basically I need something that I can hold all day long. So I designed this so it actually fits really comfortably in my hand. So I can keep my hand like that all day. Because the other tools, which are a pin like this, it's too thin, the weight's wrong, it's uncomfortable. Whereas this, I can really kind of get into all the tiny little bits of detail and scribe around.
Right.
So it's not too fat.
And how long does that specific step take?
It depends what I'm listening to, how many times the phone rings, and so on. But what I tend to do is I work on maybe 4 or 5 globes at a time, and then 4 or 5 cases at a time. And sometimes I can get 5 globes, all of that process done, 5 globes over 2 days, and then another day to paint them all. But when I've tried to speed up and do more, I end up in more seconds, so I chuck them. And also recently as well, with this whole situation that we're in now, I've just thought, why am I running full tilt? I'm in my 5th decade. I shouldn't have to sprint at what I do. I just need to kind of, not get it done. So I'm taking more time with everything now. There was a time last year when I had a massive amount of orders, and I was just really busting a gut to try and get everything out, and I almost made myself ill. So I just need to slow down rather than just it's accuracy is what I'm after, rather than the speed of doing it, if that makes sense.
Now it's a very scientific. I was reading, and it's a really scientific base that you need there, because you have the chemistry aspect with the porcelain and the painting and the various agents that you use so it doesn't stick, so this, so that. And then you have the whole math on the geography, because you are trying to be as accurate and precise as possible. So yes, you do exaggerate a little bit the heights, but everything else is precise, and you need to put the right landmass in the right place. And then you're doing, in all your project, you have a scientific and a math aspect to it.
Yeah.
Did you pick these? Is that skills that you picked up while you were a cartographer, or how did that come about?
I think it's Dad. My dad was a design draftsman, so he. Any of you who've been to London, if you've changed train at Westminster Underground, there's the most amazing, huge void and hall with escalators going down the middle, and I think there's 4 different railway underground lines that connect there, and they're all at different levels. Well, my father, when he was design draftsman, and when the firm he was working for got the contract for the Jubilee line extension, and some of the younger guys in the office who'd just learnt on AutoCAD, had never learnt from the first principles drawing and visualising and 3 dimensions and stuff. They couldn't figure out how this whole thing went together. This is pre the visualisation software that we've got now. And so my dad made a model of it. And every time I go through that thing, I just think, how did he do it?
Yes.
How did he visualise it? It's an empty space, but it's not an empty space because it's got all the support columns and everything else connecting, and everything had to be in the right. So he didn't design it, but he understood what the designer wanted, and what he drew was the structural stuff of how it fit together. So he was the sort of guy that if I said to him something about a car or a car engine, he would just sit down and go, right, okay, so the petrol gets mixed with the air and it goes into a chamber, and the piston comes up and the piston's allowed to move. And he would just explain absolutely everything he wouldn't just assume it was over your head. He'd just go, right, let's break this down, because you know how that fits with that. Well, okay, we'd take an example. So, I think, and I've only recently really understood what that gave me, my mum's sensibility with nature and her understanding and her patience, her kindness and everything else. And Dad's kind of like fascination for engineering and just his ability to understand stuff, but also between them, their ability to explain the things that are not understood. And I think what that gave me was an ability to look at a problem, just go, how do I solve this? Okay, there's got to be a way in somewhere. I might not understand the whole concept to start off with, but okay, there's got to be, like the first bit of the Rubik's Cube. There's got to be the first thing that you solve that problem, and then you solve the other. So it's just looking at things in an analytical way. And I guess I've always been like that, although when I was chucking clay around at Central just making a mess, I really
that scientific mind and problem-solving orientation must have impressed the astronaut when you met him. Tell us about that story.
Oh dear, Al. Gosh, where to start? So I met an astronaut at New Scientist Live, and it was something I never thought I'd say that. And he really liked my work, and I guess because you can probably see the thing over my head that way, which is a view of the polar cap in blue and white, and I had this little
so just, hang on, step back a little bit. Give us his full name and what he did.
So Colonel Alfred Worden, Vix and his agent and I kept saying to him, how do you pronounce it? He's going, Worden, it's Worden. So we never understood whether it was Worden or Warden or, but W-O-R-D-E-N. He was on Apollo 15. He was also reserve crew for Apollo 12. And when Apollo 12, because all of the Apollo missions had reserve crews. So when Apollo 12 crew went and did it, then the reserve crew became the crew for Apollo 15. So they had 2 years to learn. And Apollo 15 was the first one that's really been, it's kind of acknowledged really as the first one that did proper science on, rather than, yay, we got here and we picked some things up, take them back again. They had a load of scientific experiments and stuff to do. And Al was command module pilot. So while Scott and Erwin descended in the lunar module, and they were down doing the science on the planet's surface, what Al Worden did was he orbited the moon 74 times. He was in the Guinness Book of Records still for being the most remote human ever, because when he was around the back of the moon, he had no radio contact with the guys on the surface that were on the near side, and no radio contact with Houston. And I said to him once, I said, it must have been terrifying. He said, oh, great. I didn't have all that chat in your ear. You just get on with stuff. It's kind of quiet around there. But so while he was doing that, he was operating the mapping cameras. And he mapped about, I can't remember, I've forgotten the percentage now, but it's a really huge percentage of the lunar surface, including the first detailed photographs of the far side. The Russians had taken photographs of the far side of the moon, but this was the first kind of survey of the lunar surface that at that scale. So I got invited to go and show my work at New Scientist Live in 2016, and lo and behold, I bump into Al Worden, who looked at my work and went home, took one of these home with him. And I just remember the first time I spoke to him, he said, "No, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I do these." And they were inspired by the Apollo mission. I sat with my dad, and I was like about 6 years old, and I remember sitting watching it on the grainy TV and stuff. And one of the reasons I do what I do is because I'm inspired by the view of Earth from space, and you've seen that, and yes, I have. So yeah, that was a bit of a magical meeting. So he took home one of these solid ground globes, and also a little moon, one of these little guys. Oops, just dropping this.
And then you created a collection with him.
Yeah, so then when I saw him the following year, in 2017, he came his most, like, while we were setting up. So he was, just such a down-to-earth guy for someone who'd been to the moon. So he was the guest of the British Interplanetary Society, and like all of these shows, there's a big set-up time and stuff. And you've got your high-vis jacket on, and you're putting shelves together and putting your show up. And I just heard this voice behind me go, "Hey!" And I turned around, and he's standing there like that. Great big bear hug. So I've got your globes on my desk at home, they're wonderful and everything, so I've got an idea, I'm going to come talk to you tomorrow. And when he came back the next day with his agent Vix, who's since become a friend of mine, he said, would you do a limited edition for us, for we can call it the Al Worden collection, and to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the lunar landing. So, I've got this amazing photograph of them. They're having that conversation, and I'm just standing there going, "Really? Okay, yeah, sure, yeah, of course, yeah, I'll make some room for an astronaut, as you do." We'd be rude to say no, really.
So have you launched the collection? How can one buy the collection?
Okay, so it's going to continue. It's porcelain. Al very sadly passed away in March this year, and I'm still quite upset. I'm probably a little bit choked, but yeah, we launched in October at New Scientist, October 2019, and there's an Apollo moon, which is a pocket case like this, but with it's an American walnut, and then the interior is lined with a facsimile of the navigation chart that Al used to navigate from the moon back to Earth. And it's got a lunar globe inside that's got the 6 Apollo landing sites marked in gold. And they're limited edition, and they will be available again in a couple of weeks' time. They're available to order. You can contact me direct. Tag Fine Arts have 1 edition at the moment, but we took them down off the site just in respect for the family and for Al.
Right.
Passed away in March. But I've recently had a really lovely email from his agent Vix to say that Al's family love the globes and they want to continue the collection, and the funds raised are going to be going to his Endeavour Scholarship.
It's a wonderful legacy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such an honour. I mean, he sat and signed all the certificates in October, so I've got these treasured certificates, and it's those lunar globes, and then also behind me, which is a bit distant, if I move over the light you might be able to see it, but that's that white square up on the wall there is the Apollo 17 landing site, and that was one of the other things that Al did while he was in lunar orbit, was he trained with a geologist, and they were looking for signs of volcanic activity on the moon, and Al spotted what he thought was a volcanic crater. It turned out it was, and that's why Apollo 17 landed when it did, because he spotted this site, and that's why they landed there.
Oh, amazing. That's a great story.
Those pieces are available, and then this little guy here, this isn't part of Al's collection, but it was something that I made to honour him. So this is actually I'll just get the light right on this. There you go. So this is I'm calling these lunar modules, the little blocks, but this is the Apollo 15 landing site. This is Hadley Rill. And these are little blocks that either stand or lie flat. I haven't painted that yet, so it's probably that's my job for tomorrow.
Right.
All of my work is available. Just contact me. The majority of my work is made to order, which is why you don't see much stuff out there for sale, because I've normally got a 3 or 4 month lead time, and then I make things for exhibitions with Tag Fine Arts or London Craft Week.
I mean, I think the project of having a globe made that shows, particularly for people who have lived in many places or whose families have met in different places, to represent that must be a lovely idea.
Yeah, I mean, I to be honest, when I first started doing them, I hadn't really thought about that as an option, and then I get to travel vicariously through so many different people's voyages and physical voyages, and then emotional voyages as well. I mean, a couple of the pieces that I've made have been commissions for engagement a proposal.
Right.
Yes. Really hidden inside the case. But a lot of the work I do now, I do an edition called Small World, and that basically is people's individual voyages. So, and I mark places that are significant to the recipient in little gold dots. If you've done a round the world voyage or something like that, or you have family and you want to feel a link or connection, then I can scribe lines connecting the places around the globe. Yeah. And then there's all sorts of different types of cases. This one's actually got red nappa on the outside, and then it can also put messages in the stars, in the celestial.
Can you bring it slightly closer, the box, to the camera? Yes, that's it.
If I bring it too close, there's no light. But is that okay?
That's lovely. So who makes the cases for you?
I paint and line them and put this one's got a red leather cover on, so I do all of that. And then there's a wood turner called Richard Findlay who makes the cases for me. And I can show you that. So when they come to me, I can do horse impersonations.
Oh.
have to test every single one when they come through. So basically what he turns are these hemispheres, and this is how I get them. I've just started doing the interior that's actually painted gold.
Right.
And he just does small batches at a time, so it depends on what orders I've got. But he normally just he'll do six of these at a time, because that's what he can do in a day. And
but then we can also order a special case. I mean, you have cases. I saw photos of a case that had all the mountains or something in relief on top of it that had been sculpted.
Yeah. Yeah, this is an Everest box. So this is done by a guy called Tom Aylwin, who I met at an exhibition, and we had stands that were probably 5 stands apart, opposite sides, and we kind of were setting up and went, we need to talk. And he makes like beautiful, gorgeous jewellery boxes and so on. And I just said to him, look, can we scale this down? Can you make something for me to put a globe inside? So this is actually Everest at a scale of 1 to 125,000. But you can have any landscape you like on the top of this. I've just done one for a commission for a couple for their daughter's 50th, and she lives in Bermuda. So we've done it. It's beautiful ebonized oak, so it's like this. And it's got the island of Bermuda carved on the top, and the whole of the top is gilded with white gold. And it's just the island just sits there. It's gorgeous. And I stupidly didn't take any photographs before I sent it off. So this is this is Everest, and this is one that I started lining. It's not a long way off finished yet.
Amazing. Now, in addition to the globes, I mean, it's so fascinating. I think we're just going to eat into time, but
Sure.
2 things I want to talk about. One is the maps, and the other one is your globe company, your other company. So why don't we let's start with the maps and the social justice aspect. I mean, maps are a formidable tool of misinformation, manipulation, putting out your point of view, making people disappear, or point of view disappear, or groups of things disappear. And you use the Booth project as an idea to do a series of maps. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that actually dates back to work that I drew. Not the ceramic pieces that I've made now, but I was aware of Booth from when I worked at Birkbeck, because one of the geography academics was doing work on those. And I think we had a big Booth map on the wall. Anyway, so it's something that always kind of been in the back of my mind. And one of the maps that I'd drawn for a different academic was a relief map of London. So it was a contour map of London. And I remember at the time thinking, love that. It's about the landscape of the city, and city maps are always about places and buildings and routes through it and places to stop and everything else. And you very, very rarely see a map of a city which is just pure landscape. So that was the starting point of my London maps. And I'm a 7th generation Londoner. I've recently discovered I've got ancestors on your side of the Atlantic as well as from Africa. So I've just had a DNA test done a few months ago, because my aunt's writing a book about a different aspect of our history. And as I did my DNA, I went, oh, that's really interesting. I've got a sister who lives in the Caribbean, and I've found out we have some ancestry in that region, which is quite nice to know. So anyway, moving back to London, where my family from. So this was one of the first London maps I did, which is really back to front. I'm trying to show it without the glare. So that's just a relief map of London with the rivers, the Lost Rivers. So I'd been making those for a while anyway, and then I just started getting a bit hacked off about Peckham got regenerated. A lot of it is, which is where my studio is, a lot of that has been sort of socially beneficial for a lot of people. But there's always this kind of, it doesn't tell the whole story. All of the regeneration stuff is like, what happens to the people that can't afford to live in these nice new regenerated houses? What happens to the people that were here, and these people that are getting displaced? And I've got friends who are teachers and teaching assistants and other artists and people who live in housing associations, because the rents were going up exponentially in an area. Or even though the housing associations are a kind of a moderated rent, they're still moderated compared to what the market rent is. So there were people who'd been in the area for like 30 years who could not afford to stay here any longer. And I was starting to get hacked off about it, really. And then the final straw was we were nearly developed out the studio, and we had to fight a really hard battle with the government planning officer to stop our studios getting developed into a shopping mall. And the government inspector came down our side and he said, this is exactly the sort of artistic community that you're saying that you want to encourage, and this is working here, so why, we leave it alone. So we won that battle. We haven't won the war, we've won that battle. We're coming around again. We're all on a rent review, and at the moment people in Railway Arches are facing, because that was sold off recently to a different thing, and some people have had 400% rent increases.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So I'm very lucky I've got this space. How long am I going to have the arch? I don't know. So in response to this idea that it was just all seen, that the London property was all seen as just property market. It was there were all these maps about prime London and this, that and the other, and I think telling the whole story, you just kind of say, this is a bit of a skit about, this is called Modern Booth, and it's called Zoopla, which I don't know if you've got over your side of the Atlantic, but here it's an online estate agent tool. It's a marketing thing, but to me it sounds like a board game. So this piece is called Zoopla, and it's based on the idea of like London streets being paved gold, the idea of property being about entirely about wealth rather than about houses for people, and like who cleans your city, who teaches your children, all of these people need to live in as well. So these other two pieces in the series, this was the second one I did, which is called Have and Have Not, and the gold dots represent houses that were sold for over $1 million in 2013, and the blue shaded areas are council wards where there are 20% or more of children are living in child poverty. And the data came from London Policy Institute and Savills Estate Agents. And then the top one here, just move that a little bit closer so I'm balancing things on the end of the table. Trying to get the shine off the screen as well. Yeah. So this one is called Home and Away, and the blue shaded areas are where 5% or more of the families are living in temporary accommodation, and the gold dots represent properties that were bought using an offshore fund, so they don't actually contribute to local taxes. And I can't make a really public announcement about it, but I'm very happy to see all three pieces. They were in my studio for years. I made those in 2016, and people come and go, oh, they're lovely, what are they? And I tell them, they go, oh, lovely. I kind of walk away slightly kind of uncomfortable, but they've just been bought by an institution, and I'll be able to say more in September when there's a public announcement, but they've gone to a permanent home, and I could not be more delighted about it. It's a show you never know who's going to walk through your door at an open studio.
It's a fantastic story, and actually, I mean, you shared with me who it was, and I think that it's the best compliment and the best appreciation that you could have received. I think it also shows how important it is to represent this data, because we get all these data, we're bombarded with data, but they are all in this soft copy, and they disappear from our screens and disappear from our mind as a result. And having them represented in hard material and always available is incredible. So thanks for that. You also did the map of the disappearing rivers of London, didn't you? Another important piece of information about the city. Yeah, that's kind of a bit, just fascinated about
how communities evolve in a particular place, and then what brings people to this particular place, and why was the first house built where it was. And it's generally the connection to water, you know, whether you're growing plants for your own use, feeding your watering your animals, or whether there's a natural resource there. And it's just what fascinates me about London is this clay basin. There's a lot of watercourses and a lot of these little villages that have just grown and grown and grown, and they're literally, very literally taken the clay of the ground, built the bricks, built the houses, and all of this stuff's joined together. And then in order to service all the buildings and all the drains, when Bazalgette did his sewers in the 1800s, there was a bit of a convenient dribble of water. There was a river. Well, we'd just put that underground, and then it all helped flush the sewers. And so, you know, I was just kind of fascinated by that story about, you know, the water brought us to this point in time, and now it just takes part of us away.
Yeah.
What lies underneath the city is those layers and layers and layers of history, and that's what I love. What I've always loved about maps is you keep looking, you see more and more and more into things, and that's what I try and do in my work.
Yeah. We had, when we were doing in June, we did a series of conversations with the Goldsmith Company, and one of the things that we learned was that all the names of the streets and the little passageways to the river and are still there in the city, and we can link them directly to what happened then, which is of course linked to what we are living now, where we are living. So it's, the city still has so much richness, and it shows how important it is to preserve all that. I see there's lots of comments, so let me just go, because I'm on my phone, I can't see them all.
I'm aware of them flashing up, but I haven't been able to read them. So
yes, so we spoke about the cases. I think we covered everything. Tell us, we'll finish with the company that you bought and what you're going to do with it. And if there are more questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to it. I'm mindful of your time, everybody, but I think that it's been such a fascinating conversation with Loraine. I mean, we've learned so much. So tell us about your company.
So I'll try and keep this really quick. I mean, it's a really huge story. I'm mindful of, you know, affordability of London housing and everything else, but I was also thinking that with my work, because as I've got further developed these more and more, I've had to kind of be more realistic about what it actually cost me to make them. And for the first 2 years, I was selling my cases at cost price, and my accountant just went, "You're bonkers." Well, yeah, I know, but you know, there's a price point beyond which I don't think they'll sell. So I've always been trying to kind of find a way to be able to carry on making things, to sell things, but also, you know, I need to afford to live. So I've always been looking for other things. And when I first started making these, I thought it was a design thing. I'd design them, I'd get the globes made in Stoke-on-Trent, I'd find somebody else to make boxes, and then I would just sell them through museum gift shops. That's the market I was aiming at. Anyway, the guys in Stoke couldn't make them because there's so much detail goes on afterwards, and Hobby at Tagline Arts saw my work and just went, no, these are artist edition pieces. And thank heavens he did, because that it's just opened up, it's brought a new audience to my other artwork that I've been making quietly for years anyway. So I've been looking for something else that's going to pay my mortgage. That first idea. And completely out of the blue, I had a phone call from a lady to say, did I want to buy some globes? And the short story is, what she was selling was Diorama globes, which is a 200-year-old company, which her and her husband had for 40 years and done very little with. So I flew up to Scotland, saw what she had in her spare rooms, in the cow barn, in the sheds, in the boathouse, all of this stuff, and went, yeah, I'll take it. Organised and articulated lorry and brought it all back to Peckham. Now, Diorama Globes was actually based in Peckham between 1927 and 1939, and I know that because I bought a globe, and I bought a globe in France, and it had Asylum of Peckham on it. Did some research. You can date a globe by the name changes, so that's unfortunately indoors. So what I'm trying to do is to relaunch Diorama Globes. I brought it all back to Peckham. My mate Sue, who works for me part-time as a kind of admin assistant and also sort of, design testing guru and everything, we decided Giorama was known for making absolutely enormous globes, and there's enough fill your workshop up quickly when you're working on a 3-foot diameter globe. So we've just done a couple of Sue's done a restoration job for somebody, and we're looking to relaunch in autumn. But we're going to be making globes around this sort of size, and this is the original cartography that was originally drawn in 1930s, I think. But I've got all the old printing plates going back to the 1930s, some in glass. Whatever. What a lot of people don't realise now with kind of modern printing techniques and everything else, that when this map was drawn, it was drawn by hand, and every colour was drawn as a different layer. It was all so the amount of craft that's gone into the original plates. So I wanted to preserve something about that. So we've just done an update on the cartography. There's 500 name changes from 1980 to now. That's off with an art worker at the moment to get that up to date. So we're going to be offering them at this size, 12 inch. We have got a 3-foot. If anybody wants an enormous globe, if they feel their life isn't complete without an enormous globe, just drop me a line because we've got a couple. But mainly what we're going to be doing is a little gift box like this. So a Giorama logo on there, which is unfortunately back to front, which is a different size of the globe, and then inside there's this
fantastic.
And so we've got the traditional cartography and then my drawings. So this is one of my world contour drawings that it's actually based on the drawing that I did for making the big world map that I made.
And this is the little one in the Giorama, the one in the box is a porcelain one? No, this is because it's so expensive to make the porcelain ones. So what I've been trying to do is because I now know that lots of people like the idea of having the globes this size, but I know there are people that would like to have my work but can't afford it. So what I want to do is, without undermining the integrity of what I'm doing with porcelain, I wanted to have a really good quality product that was still had the essence of that, but was much more affordable. So so this little guy in that box would be going to be about 120, 150 pounds. And then there's also I've changed the format of these. So it's kind of evolved out of my other work, but doing things in a slightly different way. So this is a walnut box, and then I need to put it down to open it. Oh wow! And it's made, so it's printed. It's paper, printed paper.
Yeah, it's printed paper. So, but it's rather than litho printing, we're still treating it with a fine art sensibility. So it's a fine art giclée print. So it's archive quality paper, and it's the traditional globe making technique. So this is on plaster. So they've got weight to them. So a lot of you can buy globes that you can hang on your Christmas tree that are just pressed cardboard that feel way too light. This is obviously, I can't give you a demonstration on here, but this is of a similar weight to the porcelain globes, in fact a little bit heavier. So it's more like, it feels more like a pebble than something lightweight throw away.
And you make them yourself with your assistant?
I've been figuring out how to do it and do all the work. The idea is that I carry on making the porcelain globes and my assistant makes these. That's the plan. Yeah, so we've been doing all the design and kind of finding a box maker who can do these in quantity. The key thing with this was we wanted something that was really good quality, had the integrity of a fine art and design thing that people would feel happy to give as a gift to somebody on a special occasion, but was around about half the price of what I'm doing in porcelain. So that's kind of the scale. Obviously the larger globes kind of then, the larger you go with globes, the more exponentially difficult they are to make, but they'll still be, there's a limit to how big I can make porcelain ones anymore.
So right now Diorama is a little bit dormant while you are refurbishing the company to relaunch it in the fall, because Carol is asking, she can't find you under Diorama, but
I've built a homepage for the website. We're just finalising the samples. The next stage is we'll get those photographed, and then we'll probably do a Kickstarter campaign in the autumn, I think. We're hoping to have a quantity available before Christmas. That's the plan. So.
And I'm going to be seeing you in October, because there's London Craft Week, the first week of October, and I'll be there. Whoever can join me from Canada and the US is welcome. There's spot. And if you are in London, I will be taking day tours, organizing that, and we'll definitely come and see you, Loraine, at the art shows.
You'll be absolutely welcome, and you can come and see the huge 3-foot globes that I've got in there now as well.
I just want to know, are there any more questions before we wrap up? Just put them on the chat. Ava is asking, have you made any other mini objects together, like the Earth, Moon, Jupiter together?
Yeah, I've done. I haven't put them together as a thing, but that's something that's another thing that's been on my mind that I very much want to do. I haven't done Jupiter yet. I make moons. I make moons in 3 different sizes. So I make this little guy, and then there's a moon at that size, and then there's a moon that's a bit smaller than that one.
Right.
But a little while ago, and in fact, sorry, I feel like I'm taking too much of everybody's time now, but a while ago, I was playing around, before the little globe co, I was playing around with ceramics, making larger pieces that were kind of sections of planets, and dealing with kind of the idea of negative space and making things solid, and the materiality of ceramics and stuff. And I've just dug these out again recently because I was writing a proposal for something. I don't know whether it's going to happen or not, but something I very much want to do is go back to these, not go back, but just look at these things again. Just kind of get the quality of the glaze in here. So this is based on Saturn rings, but it's the idea of doing different planets and parts of them and so on.
Right. There's a question from Carol who wants to know if the 3-foot globe is suitable for outdoors.
No, because they're paper. They're paper on plaster. But I have. It's going to be a couple of years before I get to this, but there will be a relief globe, like my miniature globe with the relief raised on it, in a material that's similar to plaster, that's not plaster, but that would be durable for outdoors. But that's a couple of years down the line, because they've got quite a big development project to get from that.
Thank you so much. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge fan of yours. Goodbye, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.